go to when you're dealing with a particular sector of endeavor. As a startup founder, it tells you who you can work with in any of those spaces if you are looking at extending your service or partnering with others over there. And as a potential entrepreneur, it shows you where you can learn about what you need to learn. And so that's the way the report places it in that landscape is just fantastic and does a lot for it. And I think that we shouldn't just look at it as a report. And reports are usually looked at the beginning of the year, and then people move on and try to continue whatever they are doing. I think that it should serve as a guideline. There should be roadmaps drawn out of the way in which it has been placed to see where are we lacking, where are the startups fewer, and you can actually look at analysis to see which sectors are conducive for startups and which ones cause the startups that are working in there to struggle a lot. What are the peculiar problems with each of these startups? And I think with what we have here, every ministry can take a look at this report and pick their particular sector and then work with the startups in that sector that have been highlighted in that sector to solve the challenges, because they are not working in isolation. And one of the things that we miss a lot as startup founders and builders in the ecosystem is cooperation with government and a lot of government agencies. We need to work together to solve these problems.
I mean, let's focus on the problems. Actually, no, let's focus on the biggest headline from your document, from your report, which is that these startups raised between $202 million and $391 million last year. In a year where the government suddenly found itself unable to raise its typical $3 billion a year, these companies raised 1/6 of what the government would normally raise. That does not factor for their actual contribution to the GDP and actual value creation. This is a huge number. What can you tell us about how much these companies are contributing to Ghana's bottom line?
We can look at it in two areas. The first would be how they are supporting the bottom line, who they are employing, how they are keeping them active. Between last year and this year, a lot of tech companies, external tech companies like Facebook, Twitter, have laid off a lot of their staff. And there was a whole rave when Twitter laid off its staff in Nigeria and Ghana. So if we have our local startups raising money, usually a significant percentage of that goes to hiring staff, right? Because they want to scale, they want to quickly go to new markets, and you can see the contribution it does for these individuals. The second one will be the revenue that it generates. Depending on the business model of the startup, you can see fintechs are still the popular startups raising, but we have pharmaceuticals and others in logistics. And their business model will require them to either pay directly to BOG or have like a tax component that goes directly to the government. So whether the government wants to appreciate it or not, startups, no matter how informal they are or agnostic to the government's operations, they are still contribute significantly to our GDP. So I would argue that startups contributed, regardless of how the government performed last year, to how we performed economically as a country.
Yes, Josiah, one of the standout items of data in this report is the amount of capital that each of these startup companies raised in total, $392 million for the lot. In those numbers, the largest raised was by M Pharma, which is not a fintech. It's not what you might originally think as a startup in the sense of fintechs and technology companies. But M Pharma clearly is a technology company. There's also a health tech company. They've raised $30 million. That really raises the bar on what's possible in this environment, doesn't it?
Yeah, I mean, for me, I think, shout out to them and well done for doing that. And again, it speaks to staying in your lane and not doing what is trendy, because you see that because fintech is cool, everybody moves in that direction, but they are doing something that adds value. And I'm not saying fintechs don't, but what I mean is the fact that they are standout, startup in that sense. So it's easier to attract that investment, and they're good at what it is that they do. So you're betting on the winner in that sense. So yeah, I mean, shout out to them, and I'm looking forward to seeing them, triple that or even like 10x. That,
Yes.
Very soon. So yeah.
Isaac, that equity raise by M Pharma was effectively, I think, a Series D capital raise. Now, that doesn't mean anything to most of us, including myself. Can you tell us about the pathway of fundraising that effectively defines a startup and the pathway that startups go through to raise capital?
Sure, definitely. I mean, some of the things we do is working on different kind of incubator programs, accelerator programs. Startups typically have an idea. So going from the very, very beginning, startups are typically companies that have an idea of something, a problem they want to solve. They then usually need to get a little bit of funding. So that's usually like an angel round, a couple $1,000 to just kind of test out the idea in a very simple manner.
Some seed capital.
Oh, even
That's before
seed.
seed.
Then you have pre-seed.
Okay.
So then you start getting a team together, start actually going into the market. Seed helps you really then expand and establish yourself in the market.
Right.
And then you get your Series A, B, C, which is then a couple million to really expand, usually then into other markets as well.
Mm-hmm. So M Pharma, having raised 30 million, have reached the point where they're starting to both export and import from other areas, other markets in Africa.
Yes, so M Pharma are one of the standard companies as well, not just in the size of the raise, but they're one of the Ghanaian companies that expanded outside of Ghana as well. And we have a whole section of the report that highlights these companies doing that because we think it's very important for Ghanaians to realize that the market for Ghanaian companies is not just Ghana, but Africa and the wider world. And if you can now start seeing other companies that are Ghana-based, but now expanding to new territories, it shows that you can do that too. So it serves really as a motivation for other Ghanaians to realize, actually, I can go into, let's say, the typical countries, Nigeria, or other West African countries, whether it's Senegal, Ivory Coast, because we typically don't look at Francophone as a market.
In your report, you've shown there's a number of Ghanaian companies that have expanded across Africa. For example, Snoocode gone to Liberia, Kadana gone to Nigeria, ZPay has gone to Ethiopia and Barbados. It's really interesting to see the breadth and the ambition that these companies are showing and the connections that they're starting to build across both the continent and around the diaspora, really, and around the world. It's really quite remarkable. How can those who are, Ghana is almost 90% micro, small, and medium enterprises. Ultimately, not everyone will think of themselves as a startup. But now that you've told us about the process of, initially raising a few thousand, that's where we all start our businesses. So ultimately, we could all be on a pathway creating startups, ultimately, right? So how do we build the structure around those companies to make sure? That's the ultimate question. And there are a number of, just to pick one company out, that you've also highlighted as one of the female-led companies, O's, which is, and the reason I raise this company is it's a non-Ghanaian led company, but that's included in your list as one of the Ghanaian entities. This is a small company that digitizes small businesses' transactions and provides them with access to affordable capital. So helps them on this pathway that you talk about, going from pre-seed to seed, etc. Can you give us an example, other examples of other companies that are doing similar things, and how much of the ecosystem capital is being spent on this sort of pathway building for other companies to follow?
Well, I think firstly on companies wanting to expand out, it's about mindset, and firstly knowing it's possible. And that's why Josiah's helped like iSpace, and quick shout out to Josiah because he's been doing a lot of things for women from the get-go. So he can identify as a woman if he wants, but he's been supporting women entrepreneurs for a long, long time, and he's been the OG in the system. But it's hubs that really help people even realize potential. So hubs are really like community centers for people who have aspirations, usually now in the tech space. And they do obviously capacity building and technical assistance, but a lot of it is emotional and mental capacity that they're building, right? It's more like counseling, honestly. And you can attest to that later. But also, you now don't need to be a massive company. So it's not that you have to have millions before you go external. So you can be a micro multinational. And if you have a product that's wanted in another part of the world and you're able to service them, especially if it's tech, you can now sit at home and be a freelancer. You can be a freelancer startup and service anybody if your product is wanted around. So that's how you have to think first. And then, yes, it's about knowing the market, testing your product, going out there. I think one of the hard parts for typical Ghanaians is that we have a bit of a fear factor. We have a bit of a shame element. We're scared to take a risk and fail. And if we get over that mindset and try, then the world is really our oyster.
Anything is possible.
Quickly, can I add another thing that you want startups to pay attention to is data, being data centric and data driven. One of the things that we paid attention to for this report was to also not just provide the information at a superficial level, but to actually give you data. This is how much was raised. This is what was done. Even for the expansion outside the country, these are some countries that have been expanded to. What does it do? It lets you be able to quantify and be able to say, oh, in a few months or in a few years, we want to expand to even more countries. And that is something that startups need to learn. Start measuring quickly. Start measuring very early. How much revenue did I generate this month? How much did I actually spend? How much did I spend on expenses, right? And like Isaac is saying, you can even be a micro international company. Someone could see it on IG. Someone is traveling to the US and say, oh, can you send me some? And then you suddenly say, oh, I have even sold in this country.
Right.
Measuring and highlighting, it's not bragging. It's you establishing like a foothold and also establishing competence. And once that is done, then it gives you the ability to quickly build on from what you have measured, no matter how small.
Brilliant. Oswald, so much of this relies on creating a conducive business environment, right? So in the report, they've talked about economic readiness. So comparing effectively Ghana's GDP and its growth compared to others, therefore its financial attractiveness. And that then follows through to investment and support. And you guys looked at multiple data sources to find the different sources of capital, highlighting again the importance of data and also how difficult it is and even what an opportunity there is in collecting data. We've also looked at talent, digital infrastructure, and regulation. Ghana's come a long way very quickly in creating this framework for you guys to build on. How do you think we're doing in terms of focus on ensuring that we're still building the infrastructure that allows for this business environment to strive?
Okay, I think that we are looking at things from a national perspective in a very old way.
Right.
There is a way in which businesses used to be built. There's a way in which good conditions for doing business used to be created. And sometimes we go around, we throw around a lot of big policy decisions and structures that would have helped businesses grow 10 years ago. But today, there are just certain small factors that you have to fine-tune. And for those tiny factors that we have to fine-tune, we haven't really hit the nail on the head with those ones. For example, one of the biggest challenges of startups in Ghana is capital. And we have to understand that the various traditional sources of capital are not conducive for startups. Because you go to a bank and then they ask you for landed property and a whole host of other things. Yeah. And you spend 2-3 months with the bank and then you leave with nothing, right? And it's like, even though these things are created, these kinds of frameworks are created for supporting business startups with capital, we don't traditionally, it hasn't been fine-tuned to today's age, right? And so I was making an example about capital requirements for running certain kinds of systems in Ghana. I don't want to be specific for certain reasons, but the technology and the ability and the skill that it takes to build and run these systems usually is not present at the level where the capital that is required to have a license to operate it exists.
Right.
And so the people who are capable of running a particular system are probably young people between 25 and 30 who are extremely skilled, world class at running that kind of system. But then the capital requirement for running that kind of system is about 3 million or 4 million Ghana cedis to be allowed to run that system. And you realize that there's a disconnect between the skill and the ability. And previously, businesses that would have their skill levels meet with their capital requirement levels, but today it's not like that.
Wow.
So there are initiatives like sandboxing and things to allow for people to grow, but it's still very restrictive, right? We need to open up and we need to play around with a lot of ideas. The rate at which the digital ecosystem is expanding requires that we are less careful than we are right now. We have to allow for innovation to go ahead. We have to ensure that we allow innovation to go ahead of regulation. We shouldn't try to regulate things that haven't even yet got a foothold in the system. A lot of the countries that we see ahead with most of the technology that we admire that is going to control the next age allowed for these experiments to be done. They allow for businesses to go out there, try out things, and they are quite lenient with them when maybe things go wrong. Because if we don't try out new things, we will never be able to actually achieve what is next, what's possible in the future. And we are looking at an age where they say we are moving to the age of intelligence. It's no longer about information, it's about intelligence. And look at what GPT-4, ChatGPT, these AI image generators are doing. They are basically doing things in seconds that it would take someone to do. Like you can give some information to any of these AI models, and then they will transform it and bring out an output that averagely it's probably about 80% good enough to go out into the market. And you just need somebody to just change a few things and run things around. Sometimes it's even better than what the average person will be able to produce. So in this kind of ecosystem, we have to think ahead and say, in the next 10 years, what technologies are going to be important? What can we do today to ensure that in 10 years from now, we actually have a good foothold in the market and we are present there? If not, this is what's going to happen. The countries that own the technologies and the intellectual property around these technologies and the businesses around these technologies, because we are becoming a global village, literally with digital technology, are going to absorb all of the talents and the skills and the work. Because now people stay in Ghana and then they work remotely. I know a lot of people who do that, who work in the US, Norway, UK, Canada, but they're sitting in Ghana here. And there's no way to actually track them or to know what they are doing. You are probably not getting taxes from them. And so it's something that we need to look at in a proper way. We need to allow the policy and everything to be handled by those who have the skill and the expertise there. Yes. And I think that Josiah should probably talk about the startup bill and highlight why we need to pass that act.
I was going to ask you as an example of whether the framework works properly if there is such a low participation of women in the system. So I'm going to throw that question at you, but at the same time, please also answer his question, which is basically to frame it properly. We don't have the right. Everyone has a human right to migrate, to leave Ghana. If they have the skills, they can get a job somewhere else. We can't stop them. And ultimately, we have to create an ecosystem that encourages people to work here by raising the capital, by creating the system, etc. So 2 questions for you. One is, A, if the system works so well, why is the participation of women founders so low? Why have they raised so little of the capital? I think 9% of the total capital is raised by women. And secondly, how do we structure this so that we can afford the skills and talent to do the work and ensure that people don't work for others and leave Ghana?
I mean, let me tackle the last question. And I think it's the selfish nature of the citizens that we have, right? So you live in a country, you're working abroad, you're making all this money, you're not paying taxes, but then still have the nerve to talk about how we're supposed to develop things here, right? Because the countries that we are so aspiring to go to, people paying taxes in those countries. That's why they're way ahead of us, right? See, so the Bill Gates and all of these other people, when they make money, they invest in their infrastructure and locally before they even think about globalization, right? But we think on the opposite. The moment we make money, we want to hoard the money and travel to Dubai and buy investments and all of those other things abroad. And when you look at tech, it's exactly the same thing. And you talked about capital. I would always say, for me, it's human capital, right? Because the reason why startups fail is the team. Because we have a small pool of people that have the skill set. Hence, that drives up the prices that you can afford to have as a developer, right? So if we focus on training more people, or like almost use the Chinese model, train as many people as possible, it reduces the price. What it does is then other startups can then afford to create businesses and create, I'll say, collaborative startups. So if you're doing e-commerce, I could be doing logistics. I could be, like helping each other because we have the skill set and then we spread it across like that. So we have to be almost patriotic. It sounds like airy-fairy, but we have to be patriotic when it comes to developing our nation. And if you have the skill set, by all means, take advantage of the remote work that you're doing, but pay the taxes, really, because you have to. You live here. You have to, right?
Properly
And
declare
what it is
doing,
that
what you're earning,
exactly,
and
because
do your duty and pay your taxes.
Yeah, and that also then enforces the policies that we're talking about. Because when you look at a startup bill, we look at a startup bill where part of the investment where it says that $250,000 has to be invested by a foreigner to join a local company. Why do you think government is doing that? Because they can't have other means of making money. So that's where they do these things. So if we're paying taxes, they wouldn't try to, pay, kind of punish the few just to get the money they're looking for. Now, when you talk about even women, right, let's just be very honest about ourselves. When there's resources, scarcity of resources, people gamble and say, okay, I would rather invest in my son than my daughter, right? See, so, and it's playing itself in the tech space exactly the same way. So if we generate more taxes, government will have more money to invest in schools, then more women will come into the fold. You go to school, get investment, and whatever the case may be. So ultimately, as basic as it may sound, if we want this environment to change, then we need to support government for them to be able to raise those revenue in taxes to then build those infrastructures that we're looking for. Right? And once they do that, we can then hold them accountable because we have your Isaacs, the Oswalds, and all of these people, but these are individuals that are making it on their own. So technically speaking, it's very hard to then tell them, well, do this for mother country, right? But we need to be in a space where the government is able to then produce individuals such as these for them to do what it is that they want to do. And for me, it's taxes. It's just... is what it is.
That's a hot topic right now.
Yes, it is a hot topic. And it's so important that he raises it because it contextualizes this issue where if you look at the narrative around taxes right now, the narrative in Ghana is, oh, look, the government has been so spendthrift, has created so much debt, has misused the money we gave them. How dare they be asking for more taxes? But we're so far away from where we need to be that actually, really, there's no argument at all. We're just so far behind that everyone has to pitch in. And there are people in Ghana that are doing remarkably well because it's a bifurcated system. You're able to earn from the outside world and spend in a cheap environment. And that means that you have more of a responsibility to contribute. Now, Isaac, I want to bring this to the fore. One of your findings is that there's basically two tiers of investment in the startup ecosystems. There's sort of the Premier League, which is led by Nigeria. They raised 1.2 billion in 2022. Kenya is second, 1.06 billion. Egypt is third, $823 million. South Africa is fourth at 555. And then there's this sort of second tier, of which Ghana leads at 391 million, with Algeria second behind us at 152 million. So we're we're at the bottom of the top group, actually. The question is, taking Josiah's question, taking Josiah's point into view, taking Oswald's point about fundraising and the importance of funds into view. How does Ghana move from 391 million raised in a year to kind of like $1 billion being raised to 2 billion? Because that's really where we need to be. If these startup companies are taking the baton from the government, which has been traditionally relied on to create all the growth and spending in our economy. Now we're giving it to the private sector. We're giving it to the structured private sector, which is the startup economy. How do we get to the big numbers?
Ooh, good question. I think there are a few things that need to be done, and it's across all levels. But I think maybe I might have a different review of Josiah. With the GIPC, I think we need a lower level for capital to come in.
Okay.
Currently, right now, Ghanaians, wealthy Ghanaians, let's say, high net worth individuals, tend to invest more into things like infrastructure, housing, or go into farming.
Right.
So they don't see startups as an asset class. They don't see it as something I can invest in. I have patient capital to wait 5, 10 years and then get an exit. So we need more of that kind of capital to come in. Mm-hmm. Whether it's Black Americans that are coming, the whole year return, whether it's Austrians, Germans. You mentioned Oze. Oze had an Austrian VC investment.
Right.
So now people outside of the traditional Holland, UK, US are also looking at Ghana as a place. But making Ghana a destination place. I think the government is fantastic with a year return. It's really put Ghana on the map. The Black Stars, they do pretty well now and then as well, as also highlighting Ghana. But we need more things to really highlight Ghana. Our safety records, our political stability have been excellent in showing that we are really the Black Stars of Ghana, of Africa. But we need more capital, both local, so I'm really happy about the impact investments and the funds of funds that are going to be coming this year. But we need more foreign capital to flow in. We need human capital to be increased. So more work has to be done at school level, at university level, and more support for the hubs. I know Josiah had a hub training, hub strengthening recently.
Yeah.
Right?
When it comes to the support for the hubs, right? And I have to promote this wonderful thing that NEIP now looking at supporting hubs with funds for them to build their own capacity and everything else. And I think if any hub member or owner and everything is listening, this is our opportunity not to fumble, right? Because for the first time, an entity is going to support us in the private sector. This is the time for us to use that money to then help grow that human capital that you're talking about, right? And put Ghana on the map, so to speak, so we can compete on the level where more money can come in. Exactly. So we are getting the help, and it's good. And I think is really, we have to commend the government for doing this through NEIP and supporting hubs. So yeah, for me, it's going to put us in the right space.
So Abhishek, what is the Infantipium slogan?
Do what you can.
And I think that's what we need to do as a people, but also as startups and the community. We need to look and think ahead and collaboratively scope out where do we want to be in 10 years. As hubs, as startups, as ecosystem players, as universities, how are universities linking with hubs and startups to say, okay, this university, let's just say Blue Crest, we're going to go into this direction. So we're going to work with these hubs, these ecosystem players, and make sure we have a 10-year plan. And be deliberate and be pushing out startups in this way. Whilst this university is going to link up with these hubs there, right? You now have hubs across the country. Before it was only Accra, now Cape Coast, Takoradi, all the way in the north, they're hubs. It was about hubs working together with government, with private sector, and also people outside of Ghana, Nigerians and people in the EU and other places, to deliberately craft how do we get to 10 billion in 5 years' time.
I mean, just to highlight, you've listed a number of academic institutions and universities: University of Ghana, KNUST, Ashesi, UPSA, University for Development Studies, Blue Crest University, and then you've got Open Labs, and you've got some international sort of groups, but Ghana Communication Technology University, CEIBS, Ho Technical University, Academic City. It's really important to recognize that everyone is taking their piece of the pie and saying, okay, what can I do to contribute to getting this done? And when you put all of them into one picture, I wish I could show it on the screen. You put them all into one picture, you see that there's a large number of people and minds that are absolutely focused on making this happen. Now, Amishadai, I want to focus a little bit on the local fundraisers, staying on this track of how we raise capital. One thing you highlighted was a list of local funds that are looking to invest in this, and just to call them out, there's Venture Capital Trust Fund. There's Injaro, the Venture Capital Trust Fund used as a funder fund with $40 million. Injaro is a venture capital fund with $20 million. Wangara Green Ventures and an impact fund with 15 million cedis. Mirepa is a venture capital fund with 20 million cedis. UNICEF and Koika, $2.2 million available. ABSA and MasterCard Foundation with $2.5 million available. I'm sure that's not everyone, but it's a great insight into the capital that's actually available from local funds. We always talk about why it's important to reduce the GIPC entry level so that foreign nationals can bring more capital on board. How do we raise the amount of local funds that's available and ensure that Africans are funding African initiatives?
So yesterday, Isaac and I and Kwame, our third co-founder, we were at InnoHub for a Dream VC mixer. And essentially, I would say a large number of VCs in Accra who are interested in investing in the community were there to discuss how to invest, where the investment opportunities are, and how to connect. So there is a community that's also intentionally looking for quality startups to invest in. Now, we as ecosystem enablers are at the intersect between these VCs and then also the quality startups. And we are able to inform through things like the reports. Listen, now health tech is looking at some new interesting dynamics. Yesterday, we met two women co-founders who are working in legal tech. And so we are able to inform these are areas that you might be interested in, and you can inject some capital. Right. So just like you said, this list we have is not the exhaustive list. They are growing as we speak, and we do have investors also coming into the country from Kenya. There was an investor from Kenya. Earlier this year, we brought in Shegun Cole from Nigeria, who is also looking to invest heavily and is constantly asking us who are even women entrepreneurs, right, that can pitch to him. So we see the VCs who are hungry to invest. Now it's a matter of the quality of the startups. And that's why we have people like Josiah, who is actively working, right, through the Ghana Startup Network, the NAIP funding. So now I would say there is momentum. Let's go. There is no need to delay. And whatever the delays are, if it's at the policy level, if it's at a governmental level, we have always been doing what we do at the private sector. So let's keep the momentum up. And we at Innovation Spark, we are happy to provide all the relationships and the connects that we see from where we stand at any point in time. And that's why we are grateful for this, for tonight's conversation as well.
Josiah, I need to bring this down to the streets. You know, on this show, we like to bring things down to the streets. and I only found out the other day that there's something that MTN do, and I want to focus on telcos. That MTN was offering a service called Zone Data, where you could get really super cheap data. I don't know what the function is. I only found out about it because everyone started complaining on Twitter that's been turned off. And MTN, I hope you're listening, turn it back on, because the people are not happy. The young ones say they can't listen, they can't stream. But I want to talk about the telcos and the role that the telcos have played in building the rails, because they've clearly played a massive role in connectivity and allowing us to be able to do any of this stuff at all. How is Ghana's telco industry actually doing? They've done a great job in building mobile money, which is crucial in allowing connectivity. But how are they doing? Going forward? Are they still focused on building the expansion and capacity that
most of us and again, they partner with government, and for me, I think that is problematic, right? Because we talk about people playing their own role in that value chain. So if you are a telco, be the best telco that you can be, provide the infrastructure that these innovators need for them to be able to do the best things, right? And then when you want to invest into our ecosystem, look at hubs, private sector, and see how you can spread the money across, because ultimately your customers are global, regional, right? They're not just Accra. So when you put all that money into the system in Accra, what about the other people, right? And so for me, they have a great vision, but I wish it could be kind of channeled in a way that you, MTN, do this, and then let the ecosystem do whatever it needs to do, right? The other part. And then partner with so many people. Because, I mean, the question that you raised about how are we going to get Ghana to get that 10 million, we have to be very intentional about it, right? And typically, so if you have an investor that's looking for a startup to invest in, we don't know what kind of things that you're looking for, right? So we training on these startups, getting on their pitches and everything else, but they pitch to you and then you say they're not ready. So what are you looking for? So in these kind of mixes that they have, it would have been great if they invited people like myself, they train startups to then have that conversation that, you know what, I want to do agri-tech and I'm looking for this kind of startup. So that when I go back and I'm talking to an agri-tech founder, I'll be like, okay, this is what they need. This is what they're looking for. So I think all the ecosystem players have to be intentional, right? It doesn't matter what personality, whether you like the person or you don't like the person. It's about achieving this goal. Because when you look in Nigeria, they don't like each other, but they have a goal, which is to make that environment conducive for us to get investment. So you might have individuals that might have their own personality clashes, but they understand that if we bring everything together, it will work in our advantage, right? But in Ghana, we like to do that me and my crew thing, and then complain why other people are winning. And we bring exactly the same thing. We see that in sports. Yeah. You can score the goal, but I'm not scoring, I'm passing to this person. And we're doing exactly the same thing in this ecosystem, right? See, so I think the likes of the MTN, the government, the private sector, we have to drop our ego and then say, this is the target. These are the people that are working in the ecosystem. How can we bring all of them together to then move in one direction? So we have to be very, very intentional.
My fellow black man, there can be more than one winner. There's more glory to be had if we create it. Don't pull your brother down. Isaac, you wanted to say something. I'm going to go to policy in a minute, but yeah, you want to say something?
Actually on policy and MTN, I think one of the highlights of the government and telcos working together is the mobile money operability. And we in Ghana were the first to have mobile money operability, being able to send Momo to Vodafone Cash or to Airtel Tigo. And I don't think we fully grasp how fundamental and how game-changing that is.
It's this idea of intentionality and being intentional. Look, you guys have highlighted it in your report, so let's talk about it, right? You've talked about the policy state of play, and there's 4 key areas you looked at. We'll come to that, the first one last. But there's the Bank of Ghana regulatory sandbox, which is, we've mentioned it already, but so important. Because
I didn't mention Bank of Ghana's regulatory sandbox.
You meant
I was talking about an anonymous entity whose name I didn't want to mention.
Anyway,
but, I mean,
an example of how we need to create environments for people to build it. The equity crowdfunding policy, which is really important because it reflects part of our culture and our ability and the way in which we save, which is through SUSU, and this crowdfunding policy is so important for reflecting that in our society. Interestingly, you included the aflatoxin policy about food, which is in the food and agri-tech area, and highlights how much of an opportunity there is for Ghana to produce and export food products. But the most important one you raise is the Ghana Startup Bill, which has been in development, since 2020? And it's 2023, it's still not been passed. I suspect that when you next write this innovation report for 2023, you're hoping that it will have been passed. Why has it not been passed yet?
I can actually answer that.
Okay,
because basically what is happening is we're looking for an industry, a ministry to be the champion of that, right? So at the moment, MOC are the ones interested in that, and then
Ministry of
Communication, right? They're the ones that are interested in kind of championing that at the moment, and NEIP is going to be an agency that will probably be the ones that walk into that room. So the work has been done. We spoken to all the, I would say, necessary stakeholders. We're trying to incorporate as many voices as possible, right? So this bill, because we don't want it to be a political thing where because it's an election, somebody picks it up and then after it passes, you just leave it there. We want it to be a bill that means something. So it's taking time. And I apologize for that, but we're trying to do it right. We're not trying to jump on the bandwagon because Tunisia did it, Nigeria did it, so we also going to do it. We want to do it right. So, yeah, I mean, elections is coming up, and hopefully by the time you write your next report, it would have been passed, and it will be much more effective in that regards. But we definitely looking at a ministry that's going to champion it, and MOC is the one that is looking at doing that. So
we need it to be done ASAP.
We're working on it.
I mean, from the startup side, we need it done ASAP because there are some pretty good provisions in that bill that I think if they are passed would help a lot. You know, one of the things the government did was a tax break for entrepreneurs under 35. It's fantastic because it means no one is chasing us for taxes for a few years while we have the room to innovate. But the startup bill actually puts it in a certain kind of framework that allows it to be more accessible to most other companies. And so if somebody is 40, 50 and they are creating a high value, high potential startup, I mean, they should probably be able to access that kind of tax holiday. It shouldn't just be age limited.
Let's talk about this properly. Nigeria just raised $600 million equivalent for their startup community. I mean, you know, that's a group of people that's working together towards a common goal. We've got 3 minutes left of our show. The final word should be looking forward. What steps do you want to see now? I mean, for us to be able to make that kind of announcement, hey, $600 million worth of stimulus for this targeted, focused selection of winners in our community, in our economy, what kind of things do you think we can do? Final words, please. Mr. Shaddai, let's start with you.
For me, it's all about execution most of the time. Hardcore grades. What do you need to do? And the reason why I mentioned measurements is because it lets you know exactly where you are lacking and where you need to improve on. So I'm speaking to the startups. I'm speaking to those who contribute directly to the funds that come in. What do you need to do? Start measuring it and start knowing what you need to do to 10x it or increase it by any significant amount, and just go hardcore on that. And then we'll come to Josiah to help us with the policy part. But focus on what you need to do.
We can get everyone around the table. So if you guys are talking, you just need to be hearing from the ecosystem players. Josiah.
So for me, I think it's about us working together, looking at ways how we can collaborate more and support each other and just be there for each other, be a listening ear, and just we should adopt them against, well, us against them kind of mentality when it comes to all Ghanaians together, looking at what other people are doing and thinking, why are they doing this that we're not doing it, and what can we do to make it better, and then work together to champion the Black Star, really, in that sense, for me, in tech.
Fantastic. Yeah. Oswald.
Yeah, I would say two things, but they are related. Depoliticize doing business in Ghana, especially for businesses like startups. The thing about doing business in Ghana is it's very difficult to do it without political tones and political connections and other things. And we shouldn't look at these things through political lenses, because that's what causes certain things we create to live and die after 4 years or 8-year cycles. Yeah. And so we should create frameworks, or we should set up a system, something like Tech Nation in the UK. You know, I was looking at a system in Estonia that has, I was looking for a document and I found an Estonian repository that had all the documents that a startup needs. Legal documents, training, intellectual property, shareholders agreement. Everything was prepared for startups to just pick and use. And we need an organization maybe made up of a group of startups that cycles the leadership every few years to actually create content and create these things in a certain way that allows people to access it. That doesn't have to do with the government. Because if it has to do with the government, you know, we hear about a lot of grants and things that come in. You hear about very nice, beautiful sums of money. But Charlie, when you hear about the people who are getting it, you realize that you need to have some kind of connection
Yeah.
or something. Look, I'm just saying what
Say
is
it
the
as it
fact on the
is.
ground. Please. Yeah. We need to depoliticize a lot of these things. And if there are ways that we can separate these things, which would we need to ground the country in for the future, let's find a way to do that so that we can secure our place in the digital age in the coming years.
Give the capital to those who can actually use it, who've got the skills to develop and to deliver on the visions. Isaac.
I'll say once again, let's use this report as a capturing the times you are in now and seeing what's there, and let's look and think ahead. The African proverb: if you can go fast, go alone. If you can go far, go together. So let's determine that we want to go far. Let's see how we can stop working in silos. Let's change our mindsets, and let's see what we can do for the whole ecosystem, not just for ourselves.
Be more ambitious. Wow. I'm going to finish by just calling out the women's group companies that you guys have on your list. Women's Haven Africa, SC Women in Tech, Sheba, Vilgro Africa, Women in Tech Africa, Developers in Vogue, Fab Hub, Ashanti, Soronko Academy, GWES, that's the Ghana Women Entrepreneurship Summit, Impact Her, Ghana Ladies in Tech, Academy Achievers, Believe, Achieve, Succeed, UWAT, She Hub, and One Hive Ghana. The women are doing the work and they need more recognition. Let us call them out when we can.
There's Enterprise Village as well. 'cause
Enterprise Village.
They female-led.
Yeah, and news agencies should really try, media agencies try to cover startups.
It looks like
Exposure
we
helps.
are going to have to come back and look at some of these companies in greater detail in coming weeks and months. You've been listening to Asasi Business Roundtable here on Asasi Radio. I have been Kweku Adoboli. You've been served this day, this evening by Josiah Aison, Isaac, Oswald Anonadanga, and Amisha Dai, who have done incredible work creating this groundbreaking report that allows us to truly see the Ghana startup ecosystem. And for the bankers out there, the finance guys who are listening, listen, you need to get in on this act. We will be back. Happy Easter to everyone. We'll be back next week. Thank you for your time. And remember, please look out for each other.